Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming back to the Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery podcast on another great episode of Conversational Witchcraft. I'm really excited today. I know I say that every time, but I am just so excited to meet people and learn about their journeys. And today I'm exceptionally excited because we have with us Krystle Jordan. Krystle is a witch, a holistic nutritionist, and an author of The Witch's Guide to Wellness, which I have right here. It's such a good book. She has been a practitioner of the craft for over 20 years, is an absolute lover of the earth, and is a part-time forest fairy. She focuses on living a sustainable, natural lifestyle and believes that everything carries its own energy and magic. Krystle has additional training in herbalism and body detoxification and is the creator of the Wholesome Witch. Krystle Jordan, welcome to the show. Jazz hands.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
I'm so excited to chat with you too. So I'm old. I don't look old, but I'm definitely old, and I'm kind of new-ish to Instagram. I've only been really on Instagram for like a year or two because my media people are like, you need to get on Instagram. And I found you.
I don't.
I hire people to do shit that I'm bad at.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
So everybody was like, you have to go, and they're all way younger. Like I hire people much younger than me for the things I don't understand. Right. And they're like, you have to get on Instagram. So I go on Instagram and lo and behold, of course, I find the amazing Wholesome Witch, which how fucking cute is that? I mean, you're adorable. Wholesome Witch, your whole vibe is adorable. All of your content it's not just like really appealing and artistic, but it's chock full of knowledge in bite-sized pieces that I think really resonates with people, especially people that might be timid about witchcraft. You know what I mean? So I want to congratulate you. First and foremost, I want to congratulate you on all of that, because it's not everybody can do it, Krystle. I'm not gonna lie, I can't do it.
Thank you. The name, The Wholesome Witch, actually came about when I was starting my product line. I make my own products. I don't sell them anymore, but I started to way back about a decade ago. So I was like, oh, I need a name. And it went through a few, morphing of things throughout the years. But then I was like, okay, I'm getting serious this time. I really need a good name. And I just thought, oh, I like double letters.
Yeah.
And the stuff was handmade and all made with like wholesome ingredients.
Yeah.
And I don't know, people, if they have a word to describe me, it's usually cute or something like that. So I was like, kind of goes with me as a brand. Not that I'm great at branding, but I try.
You're really fantastic at branding, honestly. And, that's such an interesting point to bring. I know it has nothing to do with anything, but it's such an interesting point to bring up, because you're not just a witch. You're not just a writer. You're not just somebody who makes stuff, like to minimize it is, I think it's a disservice, because this is entrepreneurship, and it's very difficult, at least what I have experienced and talking with people that, have come into my path and into my world, being able to balance the work that you're doing as a witch and entrepreneurship and business is something people have a real hard time with. And branding is something that's really hard to do. And you fucking nailed it. So again, congratulations. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would, so Witch's Guide to Wellness is sort of an offshoot of this brand of Wholesome Witchcraft. But before we get really into the book and how you had this book baby and the gestation of the book baby, let's go way back. Let's meet little Krystle, and like, tell me, were you always into this sort of thing? Like, were you a kid who like collected rocks and made your own like potions? Or was this something you found later on in life?
No, I kind of was always drawn to those things, even though, I grew up in the city, in a house surrounded by 3 parking lots. So I didn't get, I know we used to play in the parking lot. That's what we did.
Right.
But, I did live in the Maritimes, so by the ocean. So collecting rocks, I used to bring a bucket with me, even when we went like downtown, because there was like a boardwalk and it was like lined with rocks
Yeah.
that, people put there to look pretty. But I'd be like taking my bucket and collecting, and my mom's like, Krystle, it's too heavy, you have to stop. Like, we can't carry this around. Stuff like that. I always loved Elvira. When I was 5, I was like,
Yes.
I still adore her. I love her so much.
Yes.
Horror movies, like when I was 4, probably not the best thing. I'm not sure what it's in my psyche. But
Watching slasher movies at the age of 4, just like, I don't know, blood is so cool. Elvira,
yeah,
though, right? Like the aesthetic of Elvira. We as kids in the 90s, we hadn't seen any. Like you had like Lily Munster and Morticia Adams, and
yeah.
they were like this sexy, sultry kind of thing. But then Elvira came on, and not only was she like goth, right? But she was
Mhm.
banging hot, and like banging hot. And even if you were a kid, you were kind of like, that makes me feel something, and I don't know what it makes me feel. Yeah.
Just
Right.
wanted to be her. And she was
Yes.
smart and strong and witty. And I admired her so much. I was so shy as a kid. I'm still shy, to be honest, very. That's why you'll probably never see me do a live or anything on Instagram. But yeah, and I just thought she was a wonderful role model for me as a little child.
Yeah.
But I started perusing like the very tiny new age section of my small cities
Yeah.
bookstore when I was probably 13, which is right around the time when movies like The Craft came out, Practical Magic came out.
Yeah.
Hocus Pocus was a little earlier, but I loved that movie.
Yes. Yes. I don't know anybody who doesn't love that movie. And if they do, there's something wrong with them. Sorry. Don't write me letters.
Hey.
Don't yell at me, people. Like if you don't love Hocus Pocus because it's cheesy and because it's ridiculous, then we can't be friends. Like it
You
just,
have to appreciate it for what it is. It's so good.
yes. But yeah, you were watching all these things and being influenced and being like, getting into like that Hollywood witch culture.
A little bit. And I would, peruse the bookshelves and, had like 5 books. Most of them were Wiccan books, but that's
Mhm.
fine. I didn't know like there was really any difference with
Right.
anything at that point.
Right.
But a lot of my first books were like Scott Cunningham, some obscure authors that I found at secondhand shops that I honestly don't even remember their names right now, but they were
Right.
like old books, like 70s books, like before I was born.
Right.
Um, So yeah, I had like an eclectic, very tiny collection. And the internet, it was the 90s. There was like 2 occult websites,
Right.
and they were like black and red and like really dark. At that time, that's all I could
Yeah.
find. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay.
Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, so my path has been evolving for
Yeah.
most of my life,
The
really.
90s were a weird time to be like there's often this talk about that sort of that the witchcraft community kind of goes through renaissances or rebirths every 25 years or so, every 30 years or so. And like I feel like we're in one of those right now, but the one that happened when we were coming up, right, in the 90s, people need to understand the internet was not what it was. And when I was finding stuff, there wasn't, I mean, I was 18 years old. I graduated high school in 97. So there was really no internet. You had to go to the library to access dial up, like that was the level of internet. And you certainly were not Googling, whether there was no Google, but you weren't searching for, witchcraft in the library while your mom was over your shoulder being like, I want to check my emails. Like that wasn't something that was happening. Like,
No.
so it was harder. Don't you think it was so much harder to find this information back then?
It was so much harder. The information that's out there now there's just so much, which is great and not so great at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, you can pop open your Instagram or your TikTok and get, 50,000 tidbits of information in an hour
Yeah.
if you want to.
Yeah. And
And
half
yeah,
of it, like
yeah,
50% of it isn't great. And then you kind of, you
yeah,
weed through it
you
for,
have to.
for good information. That's a challenge too. That's one of the reasons why I love what you're doing, because it is that eye catching. It is that, digestible tidbits, but it's rooted in like the real shit. You're not making stuff up. Do you know
No.
what I'm saying? Like, what you're doing. And I think that kind of sets you apart from other people that have similar presence. You know what you're doing, and it's refreshing.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
I
I
mean,
try to explain, and
it's
I
important.
don't. I tend to stick to topics that they're my wheelhouse. Like, I don't dive a lot into tarot or things like that because I only do that for myself. It's
Right.
not something, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I stick to what resonates a lot with me that I want to share with others.
Yeah. And
And
I
yeah,
love it.
like, walked out of my ass. I'm like,
Right.
I
Right.
know what
Like,
I'm putting out there.
right. You're doing what is your practice, that you can share with others, which is so great. I agree with you. I see so many people doing tarot, or so many people, sharing their readings online, and I'll do a reading for myself, or I'm not much of a sit down and do a full reading for myself. I'll pull a card. I'd be like, okay, what do I need to know? I need a quick pull and just handle it. And okay.
Mhm.
And I think I see those things online, and I think, should I be sharing that stuff? And I'm like, but that's for me. That's just for me. I don't want to share that with anybody, right?
I feel the same. Like some people are very open, like they'll share their readings, they'll share their rituals, like as they're doing it, and they'll like make a reel or something. And I love to share information and create content, but I never share my actual personal practice online. Because
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like that is just for me. And I feel like it's part of keeping a balance between like being a professional witch and being, one in my own personal life. Like kind of
Right.
create the separation. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important. Some people are public about their rituals, and not that that's disingenuous, because I don't think it is in every case. Like, if that's what feels right for you as a practitioner,
For sure.
great.
Yeah.
But I completely understand that. And I have to be honest, there are times where, like, I don't ever share like an actual ritual that I'm doing on socials, right? Like, but
Mhm.
I will. I'm getting in the habit of my magic is all kitchen magic, right? So if I'm making a meal, I'm filming and making a reel out of this recipe that I'm making. And then I'll put a little blurb about, like, these tomatoes are for this energy, and I'm making this because of that. But I'm not actually like taking video of myself doing an incantation or something like that over this food, because I feel like that part is for me. Like, I'll show you how to put the recipe together and I'll tell you what it means. But
Sure.
the magic part of it, that's mine. I mean, is that selfish? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Because there's also like we people put a lot of usable information out there that people can take
Right.
and be inspired by, but it's not actually,
Right.
what you're doing in the moment.
Do you
Like,
feel like a lot of what you're doing now is like what you wish you had had when you were coming up and finding witchcraft?
oh, it would have been amazing. It would have been amazing to be able to go online and or on socials, which didn't exist, and
Right.
search something and find accounts that you find beautiful or inspiring or filled with great information, like, and so easily. I can't imagine. Like,
Yeah.
I would just rewatch the same movies and TV shows that were happening at the time. I would read the same books because also you're a kid, you don't have money for
Right.
a bunch of books. I had like a few books, or like going over to my friend's house to try and find something on the internet because we didn't have internet.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like,
So
people don't
yeah,
understand. Yeah.
it would be great to have this kind of stuff like at your fingertips. At the same time, I think I would have found it maybe a little bit more overwhelming because
Mm,
there's so much. So for young people, young witches or teenagers trying to like find their path or find out what's right for them or what's actually correct or incorrect, because
right.
there's that as well. I think it would be harder just because there's so much information.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's effort on both sides of that argument, right? Like,
Mhm.
if we had the available information when we were coming up in witchcraft, that is available today, the effort is to do your research and make sure that you're getting credible sources and stuff like that. And what we did, or at least what I did, was like there was this one little metaphysical shop. It was, I mean, smaller than my kitchen, right? Like it was, and it's still there. I worked there for a short period of time in my 20s. It was like it was honestly, and no shade to any of my favorite shops now, this shop will be forever in my mind as the best and my favorite witch shop ever in the history of my life. And one of the reasons was because of the people that worked there and because of the owners. And even though it was the tiniest little place, you could walk in there and say, I'm having a problem with this, or I'd like to learn about that. And whoever was working behind the desk would be able to say, let me show you. Let me give you this. This is what I would suggest. And I think that that part of learning, that communal learning, is not something that is as prevalent today because people aren't going into shops and asking questions like they were, right? They'll find something online, they'll consume in a different way. And so that I feel like that was a way that we learned from our elders, from our communities. Did you have any situations like that? Did you have a shop like that in your life growing up that was helpful to you in that way?
No, I wish I could say that I did. I think I dreamed that there would be a shop like that in my small city, but there wasn't. No, not at all. There was nowhere to, get information or buy supplies if you needed or anything. There was one like earth store that sold crystals, and I would always get my mom to bring me in there. But they weren't an occult store or a witchcraft shop by any means. They just had, they were more like a crystal shop and
They
sold
just
things
had rocks.
of the earth. Yeah, but I was like, I wanted them all, so I wanted to be there all the time.
Right.
But no, and I didn't have. I had no real sense of community. It was just me, because one of my friends was sort of into it for a minute when I started to be. She was like, "Oh, that's really cool," and we would go out and pick, a stick and make it a wand and that for a minute. But she lost interest really quick, so I was like, "Oh, it's okay." It was really just me. I didn't have, and there wasn't a witch community in the city. If there was, I wouldn't have known. I was 13, 14. Maybe there was. They were older and I didn't know how to find them, if it existed at all. So no, I've had a very, very solitary practice.
So
always.
At what point in your practice, did you kind of go, oh, I am a witch, or, oh, this is the path that I'm walking? You're a 13-year-old kid and you're into the cool movies and collecting stones and stuff like that. But at what point are you and you start reading these books, at what point are you this is who I am? Right. And how do you then, in an area where you don't have community support, how do you then go and find other people and other witches either to learn from or to grow with in that way?
I didn't have a moment. I don't remember a certain moment where I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a witch." It was just going to the bookshop and looking at the few titles they had and reading the backs and a few pages inside, because like I said, I could buy a book and I'd be like, "Yes, yes." I was like, "This is me." It was a lot. There was my first chunk of it. I was like, "Oh, am I Wiccan? Maybe." So I would kind of identify with being Wiccan because I kind of thought that's what it was. You know what I mean? I hadn't learned yet that you didn't have to be. There was other branches and things, and it wasn't only that. But it was really just looking through books, and so much of it resonated with me that I was just like, yeah, this is me. I didn't outwardly call myself a witch to people until I was much, much older, much older. Except for this one friend that I said we would go and look for sticks and stuff. To her, I would say it. But other than her, no, I just kept it to myself, really. And, you grow and you get older and you change. But honestly, it wasn't until I started my product business a decade ago that I was like, oh, I'm just going to put witch out there. Why not? And I kind of for the first time realized that, why shouldn't I do that? That's great.
Right.
It's
Right.
who I feel I am. But it was a journey and a process. It wasn't, and you asked me something about building a community or something, did you?
In general, like, were you able to find, at what point were you
Right.
able to find any other people that were, or was it just like you built this brand and then people were like, oh, hey, I'm a witch, I'm a witch, I'm a witch, and they came to you?
Yeah, okay. So no, I wouldn't say I even have a community of witch friends right now. I don't.
Well, now you have me.
Now I have you. I have like some social media witch friends
Right.
now, but I met them like on Instagram and we don't live in the same city.
Wow.
So
Really?
yeah. So I have, I guess, acquaintances, but like any of my best friends are honestly dance friends, because I owned a studio with my partner for a decade. So that is where I feel like that is where I built my community. And they're not witchy people.
Mm.
They're cool. They're cool bitches, but they're not witchy people. I love them. But yeah, I mean, my partner is a druid, so she's my community, really. Like, we talk
Wow.
about things, we connect on a lot of things on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of my beliefs and leanings are very druid. She's just always telling me, you should just call yourself a druid. I'm like, well, sort of, maybe, but
I love that so much, because first of all, it's very important to have a partner that kind of gets where you're coming from. And when you have a partner that can participate in those conversations with you and in that magic with you, it's important. I feel like, and I'm not saying everyone needs to have a partner who has the same beliefs, but especially when it's something like that and you're like, okay, this is my community. This is where we built together. Because even though most of us are solitary witches, it's still wonderful to know there is community out there. How
Mhm.
was it growing up for you? Like, I come from a super strict Italian Catholic family. So when I started, like, I was always the weird kid. I was into like the movies and the fantasies and, that kind of thing, dressing up and anything that was witches and monsters and, fairies and anything like that. I was excited about, and, a lot of imagination and a lot of make believe, which I think when that happens as a young child in that way, I think it's like a little signal, like, might be witchy, um, when you're outside and you're like talking to the fairies when you're like 6 years old, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the fairies. Oh yeah, no, there are mermaids here in the ocean. Like, of course, of course,
And sea monsters, like.
and sea monsters, and there's all kinds of stuff. Um, and that kind of, in my upbringing, I sort of had to kind of like keep that to myself. That wasn't something that was like, oh yeah, cool. How about for you? Was this nature-based spiritual path, was this nurtured, or did everybody think you were nuts?
Um, well, I think I did keep a lot to myself, like maybe like yeah, I think I kept a lot to myself. I mean, I was baptized Catholic.
Mm,
Everyone in my family is,
sure.
but I don't really know why, because we never went to church. Not even on like Christmas or Easter. We just never went, but it was just
Hmm.
like what you did there.
Totally
Just like,
what you did.
so, and I went to like a Catholic school. We had to go to like catechism class and everything. And with all that, I was like, this is not for me.
Right.
I knew that, right? I'm like, this is just,
Right.
I didn't connect with any of it. I
Yep.
just didn't resonate. But my mom was very supportive about carrying my rocks, and I don't think she ever thought to herself, oh, my kid's a little bit, spiritual or a little bit witchy. I don't think her mind went there. She was just like, oh, she likes to collect rocks because kids collect stuff, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Or no, she knew that it was kind of odd that I liked so many horror movies and stuff for my age, but
How did
she
you
really,
start watching horror movies at such a young age?
I'm gonna blame my older sisters. I have two, and they're quite a lot older than me.
Uh-huh.
So I used to watch movies with them, especially my middle sister. I'm the youngest.
Right.
Um, so we used to watch movies together all the time. And I think we would sometimes watch movies and my parents wouldn't necessarily know what we were watching. But eventually they became wise to it. And my mom was like, well, she likes them. I guess she reluctantly let me watch them,
Oh my
which maybe is bad parenting, but it made me very happy. Made me very happy.
God.
um, it may have made me a little bit. I also, the house I grew up in, from my point of view, was very haunted. So I was like always kind of, and it was like long and it was kind of big and had like hallways that went down into other places. So sometimes I'd be like, Mom, I don't want to go down to this room by myself. Will you come with me? And she would blame the horror movies, but it was really because the house legitimately was haunted. You can ask my
Right.
sisters too, and they're a
Right.
little with me. But
And
she would
you
blame
were
the
feeling that. You were really feeling that.
Definitely, yes. I had like a toy room and my stuff would always be in different places. And you can say, oh, you're a kid, you just don't remember where you put it. But no,
No,
like really.
no.
Or like things would move, like I've seen things move by themselves. And there was always that feeling, especially in one part of the house where you just felt like someone was watching you. Like, oh my gosh, happens so often. It made me so uncomfortable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I'm sure my mom blamed the horror movies, but I don't think so.
So, I mean, I
Yeah.
wonder, I wonder in a situation like that, like, were the horror movie, and this is just, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but I love psychology and I love neuroscience and I love how those things meet with witchcraft, right?
Mhm.
So I wonder often, like, is that your sensitivity to the spirit, or is it you were loving these horror movies because they dealt with content, they dealt with issues that, the dead and dying and spirits coming back from the dead and hauntings, that you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because you're having that experience at home. So like, like, which thing is they feed off of each other, right? Like, so you're like, my mom thought it was the horror movies. And you're like, no, I actually feel this, but I'm intrigued by the horror movie. I'm intrigued by the horror movie because it's like exactly what I'm living through, but then this is actually happening. And do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of
Yeah.
rhetorical, but like, I find that really interesting, like how people interpret this. I fucking hate horror movies.
Do you?
Oh my God. I don't watch horror movies. I'm a giant wuss. I get really bad dreams. I don't like anything that has too much gore in it. So like, I don't mind like adventure movies, and like I love superhero movies and I love sci-fi movies and I love fantasy movies. I don't mind blood and guts in terms of like things blowing up or like swords and stuff, but I feel like I don't need to see someone's face melting off. Like,
Right.
it scares the piss out of me and then I will have nightmares.
Yeah. I will say I've gotten a lot wimpier as I've gotten older. I don't,
No.
yeah. Oh, but also horror movies have changed, man. They did not used to be what they are now. Like when I'm talking, I liked horror movies. I liked Friday the 13th. I
Oh,
liked Sleepaway Camp. Uh, Freddy. You know what I mean? These are different kinds of movies than the horror movies that are coming out today. Like
because they're more
today,
fantasy, like they're more like this could actually not happen. And then you watch something
yeah,
like new and it's like,
like
this is
they had
a
more,
little
yeah,
too
they had
real.
more camp, more cheese. Like,
Yes.
I don't know if you ever saw Dolls, but that was like one of my favorites. No, 80s, so good. It's just about killer
No.
dolls. It's great. I would happily watch that now. But no, the stuff today is more like, yeah, I feel like it's a little bit more rooted in like reality almost or something. Like, yeah, it depends on the horror movie. If it's like throwback style 80s, like 90s kind of horror movies, I'm down. I love that stuff.
Right.
But some of the newer ones, I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't want to be afraid to go do my laundry in the basement
Right. Okay.
or be alone in the house.
I am such a wuss that
So
if
I've
there's like a like scary movie preview, I have to close my eyes. Like right now, right? I will tell you right now, as we are recording this, in this time, there is an advertisement that comes on every night when we're watching TV, and it's for a new Ethan Hawke movie. the Black Phone or something like that. And
Okay.
just the preview scares the piss out of me. I have to close my eyes because it's like a creepy kid with broken arms crawling up a wall. And I'm like, I
Oh,
can't look at this. It's freaking me the fuck out. It scares the shit out of me. And like in some of my spiritual work, I do work with, you know, ancestors and stuff, but I am not a psychic. I am not someone that works with the dead on a regular basis. So I
mhm.
also feel like that some of those images are like, they're meant to freak you out. They're meant to scare you. And I feel like I don't work with the dead in that way where I know this is not real. Do you know what I mean? Like my image is like, could that happen? I don't know.
Right?
Like it's just, it's a little too real.
Yeah.
I can't handle Stranger Things. Okay. Like I am
Oh,
that
really? I like Stranger Things.
I am admitting that right here. We watched the first season. It's so fucking good. The characters are so good. The writing is so good. Everything is so good, but it's really scary. And
It's scary.
I can't watch it at night. I
Yeah.
can't have to watch it like on a sunny Saturday afternoon and just one episode at a time. I certainly
Right.
can't binge watch it. And then I have to follow it up with like a nature documentary about beautiful birds. Like otherwise the scary images are burned into my brain, you know?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, it's total tangent, but
Oh, that's fine.
I think it's really interesting because so many people I know, specifically witches that I know that are really into horror movies are
Mhm.
very much like you in terms of there's a lightness to your practice, there's a wholesomeness to the practice, there's a joy to their practice, and yet there's like I'm obsessed with all these dark horrible things. But my you know like the fantasy of the dark horrible things, and then but your practice is so full of, I want to use the word breath and joy and
Yeah.
for with a force of, for lack of sounding totally cheesy, love and light. And I think that what you do, what you bring is so much. I mean, that just kind of dovetails into the Witch's Guide to Wellness, right?
Mhm.
Your practice is about overall wellness.
Yeah. It is. It is. Health and wellness is really important to me. It's been important to me most of my life, at least since I was a teenager and I started to actually think about it. Um, but it's just gotten more and more important as you get older, you know? It's
Mm-hmm.
like things change, things happen.
Mm-hmm.
I had breast cancer a few years ago. Um, so that also, made it
Wow.
even more. Like, and
Wow.
I've always lived pretty healthfully, like really. Um, and even more so in the past 4 years. But it's also in like the past 4 years since I went through all of that and my treatments and everything that I purposefully and intentionally blend my practice with my wellness. I didn't do it as much before, at least not as
Wow.
consciously, but like having that experience really made it like a daily thing where I was like,
Right.
why haven't I always been doing this? Like it just makes sense.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
your,
Well, thank you
your
for
spiritual
sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm pretty open. I'm open about it. Don't mind talking about it. But your spirituality is part of your wellness. Like it's your holistic wellness. It's in there. So it makes sense to me to blend my practice with my health. Like
Mhm.
so when the opportunity for this book came up, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect book. I was so excited. So excited to be able to share some things.
So what was your, and again, thank you for sharing so openly about going through having breast cancer. I'm assuming you're in remission now and feeling good and
I'm good. I do take a daily pill, but I'm good. Cancer free
excellent.
for all intents and purposes. As far
Excellent. Excellent. That's the good news. That's wonderful to hear. Can you kind of talk a little bit about, if you don't mind sharing, what was your spiritual practice like before your diagnosis? And then within, because there's a period of time when you're struggling with a health issue that is that big, where a lot of people would be like angry, hurt, um grieving. There's a grieving that goes on with a diagnosis, right?
Mhm.
um there's fear, where maybe the spiritual stuff stops
Mm,
or lacks because
right.
you're in the moment of dealing with this very scary thing. And a lot of people lose it, and they withdraw from their spiritual selves. Can you talk
Mhm.
a little bit about the journey for you and how you seems like you leaned into your spiritual self to get through it?
I
Right.
did,
So can you talk
definitely.
a little bit about what that was like for you?
Yeah, I think it was almost like me, because you feel very out of control. It's
Mm,
just something that happens, and you know, there's no real reason for it. The doctors can't tell you why you got it. Like, it's not, you know, cancer is very not clear cut when it comes to who gets it. Like,
mhm,
someone who you think would get it because, you know, they smoked till they were 95, totally fine. And then, you
mhm.
know, someone who doesn't smoke and hardly drinks might get it when they're young, like myself. But so where was I going with that?
That it feels
um,
out of control. You feel out of control.
right, out of control, exactly. So you get a diagnosis like that, and you kind of just feel like your whole world spirals. Like you had all these
Absolutely.
plans, and then all of a sudden, none of these plans matter. Like you can't do anything. Your only
Right.
job is your treatments and getting better.
Right.
So I leaned into two things quite heavily, which was my spirituality and my eating, because it felt like ways for me to take control of the situation. Because like all these things were happening to me, and I was like, what could I do about it? And my doctors were telling me all the things that I had to do. Like I had to have this surgery, I had to have chemo, had to have radiation, all to, you know, make my chances of it coming back less.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, they're my doctors. I'm going to do, you know, I'm going to do what I'm told. So these things, my food and my practice were like ways for me to do something about it on my own and
Right.
kind of take as much control of the situation as I could. And also
Absolutely.
feel like I was, you know, taking steps to get through it, to heal.
Right.
So, you know, I started doing a lot of daily things like visualization and choosing my crystals very specifically. Um, my bedroom, like sleep situation, I did some things in there because, you know, you don't feel good, you're tired, you spend a lot of time in the bedroom
Yep.
when you're so yeah, all these things, like they just became daily uh rituals for me, daily routine even. um and it really helped me, especially like the visualizing and wearing my black tourmaline every day was like a safety blanket. I still wear it every day. And we're
Right.
4 years later, and it's the same one.
Wow.
um but you know, it made me feel like stronger in a way, like I can get through this, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to be fine.
Right.
So it gave me also like a sense of determination and a sense of positivity in a time that is really not a positive time. Not to say I was positive the whole time. I wasn't.
Of course. Of
I had my
course.
fear fests and everything like that, but you know, I always came back to like pep talking myself and being like, no, I can do this. And
Right.
like, yeah, the connecting to my spirituality really helped me. Like,
Yeah.
um, kind of brought like a light, I guess, and like reminded me that this is going to end, and it's just a chapter, and I'm going to get through that kind of thing. So a
Wow.
lot of those things that I developed over the couple of years I was going through the surgeries and treatments have stayed with me. Um, and it's more just routine now. Like my practice at this point is so practical and just like it's just my life. I'm not a person who will do, you know, 2-hour rituals with casting a circle and all the candles and all of this. Like I don't do that kind of ritual very often. Like if 2 hours, never.
Right.
um, you know, I'll do
Who has that
lengthy.
kind of time?
Who has that kind of time? I'll do lengthier ones like maybe on the Sabbath because I love them. I love seasonal living. It's like
Yes.
such a big part of my practice as well.
Yes.
Or you know, maybe a full moon if I have like some really strong intention in mind at that time. Maybe I'll do something for like half an hour.
Right.
But most of my practice is just my day-to-day life.
Yes.
Like, you know, setting intentions with my coffee and choosing my crystals and my clothes to match my energy and what I want to, portray and manifest for the day. And my cooking, like making my meals and my smoothies, like putting the intention and energy into that stuff. So it's all just, and like journaling or doing a card pull in the morning, like my workouts even, they're all just part of my life. So it's
Right.
so blended into my life that if you just looked at me in a day, people would just be like, you're not very witchy. Like, what do you do? You know what I mean?
I
But
know
like a
exactly
lot
what
of
you mean.
what I do, you can't tell, but I'm doing it. Do you know what I mean? Or
I know
like
exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean because everything we do is magic. We don't, and that I similarly, I have the same kind of practice. Everything we do is magic. We're not, let me rephrase that. We are not doing magic. We are magic and we express it
mm-hmm.
throughout our lives, right? Everything, every act, when done with intention, is
Yeah.
our magical practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what does that look like for me is different than what it looks like for you. Like, but similarly, like, I feel all the time like, oh, I'm not witchy enough. Oh, I'm not witchy enough. Right. I see everybody like, oh, I'm going to go, it's full moon and do all these things for a full moon and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I get, right. Like I'm going to light a candle and I'm going to go about my day, or I'm going to take a minute. And like, if I'm driving home and I see the moon, now I'm going to just take a minute and I'm just going to really focus on that and my intention. And it is throughout the day. I don't not live as a witch the rest of the time and then slot in time for craft, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and just, you'll understand this, or maybe you won't, because you said you were baptized Catholic, but you never went to church. I was baptized Catholic, and we were like a churchy family, but only on Sundays for an hour. Right.
Right.
It wasn't something we did all the time. It wasn't practices and principles that were lived. It
Mm-hmm.
was, you go to church and this is what you do for an hour on Sundays. That was, as a child, what I thought being Catholic was.
Yeah.
Being a witch for some people looks like that, right? That they're living their regular life without intention and without, will and, uh, you know, whatever, putting it through every day, every moment of the day. And they're like, okay, well, now I'm going to take off my regular person hat and I'm going to put on my witch hat and I'm going to do a ritual, and that's my witchcraft. But the majority of us
Mm-hmm.
live like you do. It's
Yeah.
daily. It's moment to moment. It has to do with, the soap I choose for my shower. It has
Yeah.
to do, right? Like it has to do with, I've started a new morning ritual of watering my plants. It has to do with the fact that, like, I specifically bought a watering can that looks a certain way so that I'm reminded of the magic within the water that will be held within it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's those momentary things. And I think that plays into what you're talking about as overall wellness. You
Yeah.
can't separate it from you as the person. And I want to take a
Yeah.
2 minute, little quick break, and I want to come back and really dive into the book with you, and talk about these concepts of wellness as witches. So stay with us. We'll be right back after we hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to the show. We are having a great conversation with Krystle Jordan today, about wellness. So before the break, we were talking about your journey with surviving breast cancer and how that really allowed you to find this balance of witchcraft and wellness and health and all those things. I always say that health is so much more than about like your weight or, what we think wellness is about. I look at it as, often I describe it as a table with 4 legs, right? Emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. And if one of those legs is shorter than the other because you're not giving it the kind of attention that it needs, your table's going to
Mm-hmm.
wobble, and that's going to throw your entire life off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
would you agree with that analogy?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, you think of it as a table. I always think of it as a triangle. I'm partial to threes. I like
Sure. Sure.
three sisters, mother, maiden, crown, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
It's my favorite number. So I think of it as a triangle, like a holistic wellness triangle, like body, mind, spirit. And you have the emotional separated, which is great because it fits with mental and spiritual for me. Anyway. It's really part of both. But yeah, if any part is shorter than the other, it just doesn't fit together. It's not balanced, right?
Right.
So, you know, using your spirituality in different ways to kind of balance out that energy as best you can. Like, it's all about you, right? And your wellness. I also don't want people to think when reading the book that if you're not in perfect health, you can't do magic. If you're not in perfect health, you can't, you know, be well. Like, it's just not the point at all.
Correct.
It's finding balance and your optimal health for you where you are in your life, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if this is the thing, like I've heard social media, I don't know, that like if you do things like take medication or things like that, it throws off your magic because
You're
the
like your
medication
vibrations. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I mean, I get that, but I don't at the same time because I said I take a daily pill
Yeah.
for my cancer prevention, and I
Right.
don't think it messes with my magic, you know. But
Right.
I do the things that I need to do to make myself feel balanced, even with that, or even with my anxiety, which is totally present. Like, you
Right.
know,
Right.
but using magic to balance all that out, it's perfect. It just makes sense. It just makes sense
Yeah.
to me anyway.
No, 100%, 100%. And I think you really hit a nail on the head there when you said, you know, it's important to do, you have to take medication for your health. Like, right. And
Yeah.
we're in a time, a really weird time in human history where people are like, no, science bad.
Yeah.
And then you have people who are like, yay, science good. And it's unfortunate because there are a lot of people in the quote science bad camp that are holistic practitioners, and I feel like I hate doctors personally. I hate doctors. I hate taking medicine. I hate shots and needles and chemicals and all of that jazz. Right.
Yeah.
I went through some health things a few years, not a few, I mean, more than maybe over a decade ago. Real doctors, like regular MDs, couldn't help me. And it was holistic doctors that did help me and did save my life. However, it is my personal and firm belief that we need to have a balance of everything. And sometimes holistic medicine needs a hand. And sometimes, you know, traditional medicine, like, you know, traditional cancer treatments, for example, in your case, needs support from the holistic side of things. They need nutrition, they need herbalism, they need Reiki, because you as a human being you're not one dimensional. You're three dimensional. We live in space and time and all of these places. We have soul and heart and spirit and body and mind. And so all of these things have to be treated. And I feel like that's where your work dovetails, right? With the magic and the wellness.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a science believing witch also. I agree. There needs to be a balance between the two things. It's not just one or the other. Like with my situation, of course I did chemotherapy and I didn't think twice about it, even though I don't take an Advil unless my headache is
Yes.
unbearable.
Yes.
Like, I don't take Advil. I just suffer through it. I'm like, it'll pass.
Yeah.
Or I put like peppermint or eucalyptus on my temples. Like, I'm fine.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
when you're faced with, well, if you don't do this, you could die. Like, it didn't cross my mind to turn down chemotherapy. Like, especially living in Canada, we're so lucky, it's paid for. Like, very few things, like I had very few medications that I had to pay for. Like, most of it is covered.
It's
And
wonderful.
I felt so lucky and so blessed to live in Canada and in Toronto, close to Princess Margaret, which is, one of the best cancer hospitals in the world.
Right.
And you know, even though I hate taking medicine, I fully embraced, you know, getting the chemo and just, you know, knowing my body's going to be strong enough to get through it. But I balanced it with other things like my eating, which, to be fair, eating recommendations from hospitals is not good.
No.
They don't know what to tell you, not really.
Right. Right.
So, you know, I took that upon myself to
Right.
do, and I got Reiki treatments throughout my chemo
Mm-hmm.
once a week from my friend's mom, who was a saint. That she came over here every Sunday and did this with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it really, really helped. And then, you know, my other daily spiritual things. But yeah, it was a balance. Like, I did what I had to do to get through it. And, you know, I'm here, I'm through it.
Mm-hmm. And these things are important for not just when I want to circle back to something you said before is like, you don't have to be a super healthy person to practice this kind of witchcraft. You also don't have to be a super sick person to practice this kind of witchcraft. You don't have to wait until you get a diagnosis to be like, let me learn to balance my shit, right? Like
Yeah.
it's about what you said earlier is that daily practice of wellness, that mindfulness of what am I eating? What intention am I putting into this action? What intention am I putting into this food? And so on. Can you talk a little bit about what we're going to find in Witch's Guide to Wellness, which has this great little subtext, natural magical ways to treat, heal, and honor your body, mind, and spirit, which is so perfect. So, like, for example, you go through everything in this book from skincare, natural skincare, to food recipes, to letting go of things, whether that is emotional letting go or physical letting go of things, because all of that is wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So did this book come out of this experience of learning to find that balance? Were all these things you practiced to help you through that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of rituals and practices in the book. So I can't say I practice all of them regularly because there's a ton. But things like, you know, the food stuff and the product stuff and the herbal remedy stuff, like those are things that I do just because I do them. Like I make my own skincare stuff, like make my own toner and my own body lotion and face cream. And, you know, I'll make a tea when I am, you know, not feeling great. And I think we mentioned this before we started recording. I'm a coffee person, but tea has its place.
Yes,
um,
yes.
so I do drink tea when it's needed. I sometimes wish it was my drink of choice, but it isn't.
Same, same.
So there's a lot of things in this book that I do every day and you could do every day. There's also things in the book that you might just do once a season, like some of the letting go rituals or some of there's rituals in there for motivation and confidence. Like those might be something you do just when you feel it's needed. But I really did try and give a lot of variety to the book. I'm looking this way because I have the book and I keep looking at it. So if I'm looking down, that's why. um, yeah, I tried to have a lot of variety and basically just so that whoever picks it up, they can, you know, either do the ritual as it is or just
Mm-hmm.
gain inspiration from the different types of stuff that's in the book.
Mm-hmm. And I personally love how much kitchen witchery you have in the book, how many recipes you have. You know, that's my jam. So I love that you have so much magic, especially around wellness and healing, starts with food, you
So
know,
much, yes. And it's
so much.
such an overlooked topic, nutrition. Like I've been interested in nutrition for a very long time, probably since I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
it has changed because when I was a teenager, it was about being skinny. Now it's about, you know, actually being healthy. So it's morphed over the years as well.
Sure.
um, but it's just something that people don't consider enough at all. They're like, oh, I'm
Agreed.
down, I'm doing this. You know, I'm too busy. And then they'll go have like a burger and fries and a beer after work.
Mm-hmm.
That is not conducive to, you know, re-energizing yourself or making you feel better. That's all fine and good to do. Like it, you know, moderation, we live. But I just feel like people don't consider food for healing nearly as much as they should.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's big part. Like your food literally, in a lot of ways, dictates how your body functions, you know?
100%.
Like
100%.
it it
Yes.
it does. It's so important. So for the book, I was really keen to do the physical wellness chapter. It was probably my favorite to write because food, nutrition, movement, and exercise are like they're my jams as much as kitchen witchery is. I love that stuff so much. And I felt like a lot of books, mostly kitchen witch books that include recipes and stuff, the recipes are great. I love them. They don't often add in a nutrition element. I find that's missing. Um, so I really wanted to make sure that was in there so that the
Mm-hmm.
recipes in the book were healthy recipes. It's a wellness book, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any recipes for pie or any cake in there, but I do have delicious recipes nonetheless. But adding the nutrition aspect was really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
felt it also made it different from a lot of books that are out there because you don't read anything really about nutrition and magical practice as, a thing you think of together either.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
So,
like as a kitchen witch, I would say when we were talking earlier about, finding a holistic doctor that basically saved my life, it was about
mhm,
food. I was a practicing kitchen witch before I found out I had these crazy food allergies. Right.
mhm,
So
mhm,
again, I've always struggled with my weight and I've always struggled with my relationship with food. And then I found out I had all these crazy ass food allergies. I'm still a chubby girl, but I'm much healthier than I was. Like I'm the same size, but I'm much healthier than I was
for
because
sure.
I stopped eating the things that my body was like, you shouldn't be eating this. And I want to address what you said about, don't go out and eat a burger and fries and a beer after work. That's and finding balance and like, hey, that's totally fine to do from time to time. Right.
Mhm.
But being mindful about where did that food come from? Eating fast food,
Yeah.
burgers and fries is
Mhm.
very different than going to, for example, a local person who, local beef
Mhm.
and making that burger yourself and grilling it yourself and creating, cutting potato wedges and roasting them in olive oil is completely different than hitting the drive through. So there's so much about nutrition, but also about spiritual nutrition and the energy in which that food is made that
Yeah.
can. I think you're 100% right. People don't talk about it. People don't think about it. And it is
Mhm.
part of the magical work and it changes the nutritional value of something, right? If you're like, oh, I'm going to get a salad and it's going to be iceberg lettuce because it's salad and that's
Yeah.
healthy, it's
Yeah.
not. Like you
Yeah.
need something, the dark greens, and you need vibrant colored vegetables, and you need make your own dressing. Like it's not really that
Mhm.
hard to do, you know, all of that plays into physical nutrition as well as spiritual nutrition because we're dealing with the vibrations of the food and the earth and what we're putting into our bodies makes makes the difference. I have to agree 100% with you.
It makes such a difference. It's like still eat delicious food that you love, but choose whole foods. Choose to start your recipe with actual ingredients. You
Right.
know, eat in season. Go to your local farmers market or a farm if you live close to one, or even your local supermarket. But just be mindful of what's in season. And I'm not saying never buy a banana because I buy bananas and I live in Canada, so I know they're not local.
Right.
But,
Right.
as much can choose foods that are local to where you are and in season, and they're going to have the most nutrients, they're going to have the best flavor,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to have the most energetic properties that you can feed yourself with in
Yes.
a different way.
100%. And that's something that I talk about all the time in teaching in books and stuff. I'm like, you think that eating locally, you think that eating seasonally is hard, but it's actually so much easier than you expect. Even big retail stores, if you're in a place where you don't have a locals farmers market, or maybe you don't listen, being able to eat in that way is a privilege, and I understand that, and I'm grateful that I live in the part of the world where I can do that. I'm grateful that I have the socioeconomic position that I can choose that, but you
Yeah.
can still choose nutritional things. You can go someplace and find inexpensive flash frozen vegetables that, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's about turning the light switch on and people understanding that nutrient rich food and locally grown food and seasonal food, they all overlap. And they're, do you know what I mean? And that is magic. That is witchcraft.
And, you know, I get being on a budget. Trust me, I know what it's like to have $50 to go to the grocery store and you are keeping track in that cart. It's like, okay.
Oh, writing it down. I'm like loaf of bread, $2.50 and doing the math. And at the end being like, I have to put this back.
I have to put something back. Totally. So I totally understand it. But so many healthy foods are some of the cheaper foods.
Yes.
Like beans, apples, like brown rice. This stuff is not expensive. So like you can eat healthy even if you're on a budget.
Yes.
To a certain degree. I know there are some, of course, that, you know, they don't even have that.
Right. But you do what you can when you can.
Do what you can, exactly.
You do what you can when you can, and it makes a difference because you're doing it mindfully. Right. Yes. We literally should have had this whole conversation be about kitchen witchcraft, because we would have just
I know, now we're almost out of time.
And like, there's so much I want to talk to you about, recipes and food and like how we consume food and how to cook food. And I'll share this one thing with you. I just got, for the first time, like I've been living my whole life with, well, not my whole life, but I've been living since we bought the house that we're living in. We haven't had a grill. Okay. So we've been here for 6 years and I've never really had a grill, never had a backyard until this house. And now we have a backyard and we put a deck on and we put a grill out, and I inaugurated my grill last week, and literally I have been grilling everything for the last week. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. I know it sounds awful. Everybody else is going to be like, we grill all the time. It's not that special. It is special when you haven't had it. You know, I threw asparagus on the grill. I threw chicken on the grill. I threw vegetables on, everything is on the grill. And it just sort of, it's not as hard as you think it is to be able to cook in this way. And again, doing it mindfully is just, it's just the best. Something else I love in your book specifically, you've got this releasing ritual to release guilt and gaining forgiveness.
Yes.
And I want to talk about, and then healing ancestral trauma. These are two things for me when going through your book that really spoke to me, that I wouldn't have expected to find in a book about wellness.
Well, it is part of wellness.
Correct.
It's things that we hang on to that can cause all sorts of problems.
So can you just, with what time we have left, can you talk a little bit about specifically why you chose to put these types of things in a book about wellness?
So your emotions and having things fester and holding on to negativity from wherever it might come from, something you feel guilty about, or something, an ancestral type of thing that's just filtered down through the generations in your family. All these things inside, just, they prohibit in ways your body from functioning well. They create blockages. The energy doesn't flow. And, you know, they cause stress, which we all know is horrible for the body. So letting go of all of these types of things is a huge part in finding balance. You're not going to find balance if you're holding on to stuff from years ago or generations ago. You know what I mean? So you have to find an outlet. You have to find a way to accept it, acknowledge it, and then let it go. Let it go. You have to move forward, right? And all these things are just, they're holding you back physically, spiritually, you know, mentally.
Right. Right.
So, and I don't know, I think things like shadow work are a hot topic right now. Like everyone's talking about doing it. And it is important. It definitely deserves a place. And it's, it's important for gaining that groundedness and centeredness, and even tapping into your own magic and your own authenticity. Like all these things you could be holding on to are just getting in the way, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point to make. And I think you're right. shadow work and that term gets thrown around a lot and it's things people talk about. But I don't think people get the depth of what that means, because doing real shadow work and working spells like you have here, these rituals that you have here about letting go of generational trauma, letting go of, finding forgiveness, letting go of guilt and things like that, that then requires a mental health component to find what that is in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to let it go. And I think a lot of people are reticent to do that level of deep work and really, really look at themselves and really hold a mirror up to themselves and be like, why am I such an asshole about this particular thing? Is it me? Oh, it must be me. Look at what a dick I am about this, or look at this thing that I'm holding on, or let me look at the real ugly parts of myself before I can let them go. And that, I think, is why there's not enough depth in this conversation, because I don't think people look at that in truth and be honest with themselves about those things, right? And I think you nailed it when you said this is part of wellness, right? You're not going to be able to flourish and be well in your body, in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit, if all of this stuff is clouding you, right? Right. I think it's just brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah. You really do such a great job of being comprehensive in hitting all these notes for overall wellness. I feel like this could be like the first volume in a wellness encyclopedia. Like, I feel like there's right. Like, I feel like there's so much
book. Yeah.
Right. Sure. Like there could be like 4 or 5 more of these books specifically for like wellness. Here's the witch's guide for wellness for spirit. And here's the witch's guide for wellness for body. You're just awesome, Krystle. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So Thank you. Before we go, tell us where we can find you online. If people have questions or they want to follow your amazing Instagram feed, because your Instagram is so great. How do we find you, and how do we buy your amazing book, The Witch's Guide to Wellness?
So you can find me at The Wholesome Witch on all the regular platforms: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. I am not on TikTok as of yet. We shall see if that ever happens. I kind of feel like I'm too old. It's like it's too much for me, but we'll see. Yes. Not there. I have my website, which is thewholesomewitch.com. So everything has the same name, nice and easy to find me. You can always email me or Instagram message me. I do my best to respond to everyone's messages that I get. And the book is available pretty much wherever books are sold. The regular Barnes and Noble, Indigo if you're in Canada.
And your local bookstores. Support your local bookstores.
That was what I was going to finish with. And of course, bookshops. If your local bookshop doesn't have it, they can order it in for you. So just request it.
Yeah. Request it. Okay. So
bookshops first.
The Wholesome Witch everywhere online. The book is The Witch's Guide to Wellness by Krystle Jordan. Okay, Krystle. Yes.
Sorry, because I always forget. I also have an Etsy shop. So it's The Wholesome Witch on Etsy, and I sell printable grimoire pages. So, not everyone has time to handwrite and draw, or is crafty enough or artistic enough to make a beautiful grimoire. I'm jealous of those people. I'm not one of them. So I do have an Etsy shop where I sell printable pages that are also great for reference pages, covers everything like herbs and oils. There's a kitchen witchcraft bundle. There's tons of stuff.
It looks awesome, actually. So, I might have to get the coffee one. There's a coffee grimoire page, and it's just so good. I feel like I want to get it and like hang it in my kitchen. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Anyway, so I just wanted to put that out there because I always forget about my shop, and it's like quite a big part of what I do.
Excellent. Okay, so last question, Krystle, and I ask this to everyone who comes on the show. It's completely unrelated. Okay. Now, I don't know how you're going to respond to this because you are also kitchen witchy, right?
Yeah.
If you could have me as a kitchen witch make one magical meal for you, what would it be and why?
Ooh. That is, A very hard question. Think of all that. Okay, I think I would ask you to do like a vegan eggplant lasagna.
Ooh.
That's what I would ask for because vegan lasagna, good vegan lasagna is hard to come by. And I think you're probably a really good chef just by looking at your Instagram and stuff. I'm actually not a great chef. I mean, I bake and stuff. And people might think, oh, Kitchen Witch, you got to be a really great cook. You don't.
You don't.
You don't have to be a really great cook. Just want to put that out there.
You
Um, I
don't.
like I like simple meals. But yeah, I think an eggplant lasagna from you,
Mm.
I am vegan, would be delicious.
So do you need it to be a gluten-free vegan eggplant lasagna or just
Mm,
eggplant lasagna?
no, I'm all good with the gluten.
Okay.
Give me gluten, I love it.
So in which case I would use a silken tofu that I would whip with all kinds of herbs and spices to give it a ricotta kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I would do grilled eggplant slices, like really, really thin, long ways. And I would layer them with lasagna noodles and a
Mhm.
fresh pomodoro sauce and tons of basil. And then it would bake it all together. And I would make sure I find a really good vegan substitute for mozzarella because you got to have that. You need that stretchy, chewy. So I'd have to do a lot of research on that. But that's how I would make it for you. And I would
It sounds
use the silken tofu and I would whip it together.
it makes me wish we lived closer.
Well, if ever you're in New England, you come and visit me and I will make it for you. I say that to like a lot of people. I'm like, yeah, come. If you're ever here, come and visit. I'm like, one day I'm going to have like a giant party in my yard with all of my podcast guests. And I literally cook them everything, like all of their favorite foods that they've asked for. And you are not the first person to ask for vegan lasagna because I guess it's hard to
Really?
find. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's got to be
Oh,
really hard
okay.
to find.
I can't wait to get that invitation.
I'm so excited. Krystle Jordan, thank you so much for being here. This was a delight. You are absolutely wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll have to do it again, Kitchen Witch themed.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We absolutely will. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, I wish you
Thank you.
many, many, many blessings and so much gratitude. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Bye.